7.5, still doing systems. But we changed one little thing here. We're going to do systems of inequalities. And because of the inequalities now, we're changing it more from solving and looking for one specific point to looking for lots of points. Because now we're going to start shading lines, and when we're looking not just for a point, we're looking for an area. We're looking for a zone, basically, is what we're looking for now. And now, before we do anything, let's kind of flash back real quick. That if you have y equals mx plus b form, if it was y greater than mx plus b, this would be a dashed line. And with the dashed line, because it's y greater, you would shade up. If it's y greater than or equal to mx plus b, the difference is it's going to be a solid line. But again, you still shade up. So remember, if we're doing once you draw the line, put your pen on the line and draw and shade and go from there. If it's y less than mx plus b, that's going to be a dashed line. And again, because it's less than, you're going to shade down. And if it's y less than or equal to mx plus b, solid line, and then still shading down. Now, where they're going to, and that's the basics of it. Now, they're still going to go back and pull in a couple of different graphs. They might have you do some circles. That it may be that, let's say, if you remember back for the circle equations, it was x squared plus y squared. Because this is back in section 9, 10. I think when we were doing these. We were doing the equation circle. We didn't actually graph these. So one thing we need to back up for just a minute here is if you're going to graph circles. Going back to chapter 1, when we were solving for circles and we were finding the equations and doing those things with it, but we never did actually graph those. Going way back here, you've got to remember that H and K, that's going to be your center, whatever that's going to be. And remember, you're always going to change the sign of whatever that number is. So if this was x plus 2, when you pull it out of the equation, it's going to be x minus 2. Or it's going to be negative 2 for the H value. And r squared means that, of course, that your r is going to be your radius. That you're going to have to square that value. Or square root it to get to square root the r squared to get down to the r for the radius. Okay, now the one difference on these is that because, again, we're doing inequalities. If you're graphing this part and it is less than, and we'll just, just for time's sake, we'll say that whatever the h and k are, that's fine. But as long as it's x squared and y squared, if it's less than or equal to, r squared, this would be a dashed circle. This one will be a solid circle. If it's less than, though, if it's going to be less than the radius, you're going to be on the inner part of the circle. So whether it's less than or less than equal to, that's the dashed or the solid part. But if it's less than or less than or equal to, if it's less than the radius, that means you're going to be inside the circle. On the flip side, if it's greater, again, only difference is one's going to be dashed, one's going to be solid. But for these, you're going to shade outside the circle. Okay, that everything else we did some graphs of quadratic. They'll throw in a quadratic occasionally with some of these, so that'll pop up. But everything else, it's pretty much you're going to shade up and down. You know, if it's y greater, if whatever the thing is that's greater, you're going to shade in the up direction. If it's whatever it's less than, you're going to shade in the down direction. The only one that's different is the circle, because you're basically inside the circle or you're outside the circle. So when we're graphing these, that's pretty much about the only thing that you have to remember on those parts. Okay, so let's give you some actual graphs to actually graph here. All right, one thing that they do before they even get to that part of it is they're going to have you graph not a system, they're going to have you just graph one line. Just to back up and make sure you remember what's going on here. Let's do x minus 2y less than 10. Okay, so we've got the x and the y. We want to put it in y equals mx plus b form. So I would say first thing is let's subtract the x and take it over to the right-hand side. And if we're doing mx plus b, we'll put the x first. Okay, to get y by itself, we're going to take this equation or the inequality, divide everything by -2. Now here's the one thing, here's the reason why we've got this problem. If you divide everything by a negative, you've got to remember that for this inequality symbol, you're going to reverse it. So this would make this y. Those two negatives makes that a positive, and that makes it a -5. Okay, so basically if your y value is negative, you're going to have to switch your signs, because if you're going to put it in y equals mx plus b form, if that value of y, if the coefficient's negative, then it's going to wind up reversing the whole inequality symbol that's there. Okay, once you've got that part, then we're good to go and graph. We'll do just a quick sketch of it. B value is -5. Again, the B value tells you where to begin, so we're going to start at -5. And the x over 2, that's our slope. So from here, we're going to go up 1 and over 2. Up 1 over 2. Up 1 and over 2. And this one was a dash line. And because we switched around, so now it's going to be that we're going to shade up. So when we graph this thing, should be that. And again, from the shade up part, and again, I always tell people when you're shading, just keep it as simple as you can. Put your pen on the line, and then just draw whatever direction it is. If it says shade up, then just draw everything up in this way. That way you know that you've got to be on this side of the line. Okay, so there's one equation, and again, I know we've done the graphing, but we haven't done any shading on these with the inequalities. The closest thing we did was 2.7, I think it was, where you had the open circle and the closed circles. But, that one we're going left and right, but this one, we're actually shading on this. Let's give you one with just a circle, since we talked about it, but didn't actually do one here. So let's go x plus 1 squared plus y squared greater than 9. Greater than or equal to. Okay, so for the center, take the two numbers that's with x and y. In this case, it's positive 1. We're going to change it to negative 1. There is no number with the y, so that makes it 0. And again, r squared is 9, so when you square root that value, you get that your radius would be 3. Okay, we didn't have to shift or move anything around or do anything on that part. So for this one, that's going to be a solid line. And it's greater, so we're going to go on the outside. Okay, so negative 1, 0 would put us right here. Okay, and with the online homework, that one should give you the option for the circle. So you would put your dot here, click the button for the circle, put the dot for the center right here, and as soon as you start to drag out from there, it should start automatically drawing the circle for you. So it should look something kind of like this one. So that you click here, and then as soon as you start to move, that didn't work. That's supposed to go out from there. Well, that didn't work either. Okay, let's freehand it. Do something like that, where this is going to go 1, 2, 3 that way. Let's just redo that. Basically, with your radius, you go 3 in every direction. So you go up 1, 2, 3, have a dot here. 1, 2, 3, have a dot here. 1, 2, 3, right there. Right there. So that basically, and again, y'all should work out with the online homework that it's either going to be multiple choice or it'll be easier to draw the circle. Yeah, it kind of draws it out for you. This one, you would have a circle like that. And shading on the outside means it would be something like this. And to me, these are the questions when you're doing this, especially if it's just the one inequality, that's screaming for multiple choice, because you can make that 4 easy ones. You could have the center in the correct position. You could have the radius out here. You have one with shaded outside. You have one shaded inside. You have one with a dashed line shaded outside. And you have another one with a dashed line shaded inside. And you just got to know which one is going to be on that one. So I think it may be multiple choice, but some of those, they may make you draw some of these shapes too. Okay, one more, just basic inequality, and then we'll go to the systems. Because we'll go back to the graphing that we haven't done since chapter 2. Did a little bit of it in chapter 1, and then a little bit more of it in chapter 2. Okay, and this one's set up for you so we don't have to worry about moving anything around. It's going to be a dashed line, and you're shading down because it's less than. Okay, and if it was just y equals x squared, that would be one we would draw that. Then we would shade it, but here's what we got to remember. With the minus 1 that's outside of parentheses. What is that minus 1? And it's kind of good for the final. We're getting pretty close to it here. With a minus 1 that's on the out, there is no parentheses, so it's on the outside of the parentheses. What does that minus 1 do? Which way does it move it if it's outside of parentheses? Close. Not up, but down. So if it's on the outside of the parentheses, it's up or down in the normal direction. So if it's x squared minus 1, you're just going to take that graph that we had that was here and just drop it down one spot there. And it was dashed. It would look something like that. Now, if that parenthesis, if it had been more like this, where the x squared wasn't here, if it was that, that would move it one place to the right side, because you go the opposite direction. If it's on the inside, that's when you go opposite direction. If it's on the outside, or there is no parentheses, then that's going to move it up and down in the normal direction there. So, to me, that's kind of a good review, because we're not to the final just yet, but we're getting pretty close. So that's kind of a good review question. Think about here. And if you look back at the one before it with the circle, that was on the inside, so we had to change the sign. Anytime you're on the inside of the parentheses, you're going to change the sign. If there's not a parentheses, then it is what it is. Okay, and shading down, same thing on this one. Just put your pen on the line. Doesn't matter whether you start over here or not. Shade down. Shade down. Shade down. Shade down. So that's going to put you going in this direction. Okay, so there's, and again, we did almost everything except for that one little part with the number lines. Everything we did was graphing equations. This one, we didn't graph the circles at all, so that was kind of the first time of seeing that one. But the shading part is, if it's y less than, you're shading down. If it's y greater, you're going to shade up. I mean, that's the easy way of doing that, except for the circles. That's inside, outside. Okay, so let's put it to a system here. So go 3x plus 6y less than or equal to 6, and 2x plus y less than 8. Okay, so no x squareds, there's no y squareds. So this one's just pretty much just a y equals mx plus b. So we're going to have to take both of these equations and put both of them in y equals mx plus b. Okay, so for the top one, we'll subtract 3x. Make it 6y less than or equal to negative 3x plus 6. And then divide everything by 6. So we're going to have y less than or equal to negative 1/2 x plus 1. Okay, and to me, I would say, now it depends on how they want the answer on these, but I've always one of those that it's almost easier to kind of put this one on paper first before you put it online, because to me, what I would do if I was on paper, because just to kind of lay this thing out, I would go ahead and graph that line. And we'll do that one in red. We'll come back and change the other one in blue here in a little bit, green. If we're going to graph this line, the b value is positive 1, so that's here. Slope is negative 1/2, so we're going down 1 over 2. That was a solid line. And for this particular line, it's less than, so we're going down. We're shading everything in this direction. I'm going to leave this one in red just so it's a little bit easier to see. Because I'm thinking with the problems that you're going to do online, they only want the region shaded that is the final answer. They don't. This one we're going to kind of do the 2 steps to get you to there, but I think this is almost one of those that it's almost easier to do each piece separately because it's easier to keep up with it. Okay, so for the second equation, we're going to do that one down here. To get that one in y equals mx plus b form, we're just going to subtract 2x from both sides And it's going to be good to go. So it's going to be y is less than negative 2x plus 8. Okay, so for this one, we're going to start at positive 8, somewhere way up here. So that's 1, 2, 6, 7, 8. Okay, had to make it work out that way. 1, 2. So for this one, we're starting at positive 8 way up here. We're going down 2 over 1. Down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. So that's going to cross right here. And this one is a dash line. Let's see if I got, there we go, a dash line. Let's go in something kind of like that. Alright, I'm going to extend this one so that it'll cross here. Okay, so for these lines, for the inequalities, like for these, you've got to extend these lines until they cross, because that's the main thing we're looking at. Okay, the green line, this one was a dash line, and we're going to shade down. So if we start shading, that one, if you want to angle it a little bit, you can. Basically, we're going like this. Okay, so what we've got to see, though, is the answer we need is where the red and green go together. So we'll do that with a highlighter here. Basically, that's going to draw us a line through here. And once we hit the green line, we're getting cut off. So that's everything kind of back in this section. And that's what they're going to have you do on the line part, is that they're not going to make you do... They don't want to see the work on these. They just want the final answer. So for yours, you know, this part where you've got the green in the middle, that part wouldn't be here. That this would be out. And this part back here, we'd have a little bit of red back here. That part would also be out. So the only thing you would see would be this one. If you could kind of, it's a slanted X. You basically got the 4 pieces. The only thing you're going to have is that one little part that's here for that part. If you're showing your work, you'll see that section in and that section in. But I think online it's just going to be that one shaded region that you're going to have there. All right, let's give you a couple more systems. Let's keep doing a few more. All right, let's get sneaky on this. Uh-oh. Only got one variable. Okay, the one thing I've started saying, and it's helped me kind of realize it too, if you have X and Y, you've got some tilt because it's going in both directions. If you've only got one variable, you're only going to go one direction. It's either vertical or it's horizontal. You just got to figure out which one's which on this one. Alright, so if it's X less than or equal to 2, that means your X value, now this is one you can almost kind of think, if you forget which one's which. Think about this one as being X equals 2. That, you know, if X is 2, you're going to have this. Pick 2 different numbers. It doesn't matter what Y. Y can be anything you want. So I would say pick like 2, 0 and 2, 1. Graph those 2 points, and then that'll give you the general direction of the way the line's going to go. So if you go over to 2, 0, that's a point here. If you go to 2, 1, that's a point here. So X less than or equal to 2, that's going to be a vertical line. And the good thing with X is the arrow is pointing to the left, which means when you start shading, it's going to go to the left. Okay. and then y less than equal to 1, or sorry, y greater than 1. Well, if x was vertical, that means y's got to be horizontal, so we'll go to -1, and we'll put a dashed line there. And that one is greater, so we're going to go on the upside. Okay, now again, I think the final answer for the online part that you're going to want is just the part that is where the two regions overlap. So just, there we go. There's our happy land. That would be our shaded region right there. That would be the only thing that you would see shaded in on that part. You wouldn't see this. Now you'll see the lines, but that would be the only part that you would see. Okay, so if you get, again, one variable, it's only one direction, and I would say just memorize that one. Or if you have to, just write it down, and hopefully, it'll kind of sink in. All right, let's give you another one here that's a little bit on the funky side. -2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 5. Okay, going back to the problem before, if we took this part out, if it was -2 less than x, well, hang on, let's go the other way. If it was x less than 5, that was a vertical line, right? And on the flip side of it, if we put the -2 back in there, that basically means that x is in between -2 and 5. So if it's only the one letter, that means that it's got to be, x is basically stuck in between those two values. So we go to -2 and draw a vertical line there. Go out to 5, in this case draw a dashed line. Then x has got to be everything in between those two pieces. That's everything in the middle. Okay, so again, if it was y value, it would be a sandwich where you have an upper line and a lower line, and then it'd be everything in between those two lines. If it's just x, then you've got those two vertical lines. One's at -2, one's at 5, and it's just everything in between those two numbers. Okay, 2 more graphs, and then we'll look at a couple of questions that says without graphing, but they're kind of trick questions when they give you that part. It's in the homework. So let's go with x plus y greater than 4, and then x plus y less than -1. Alright, same thing. We've got to take, now both of these are pretty straightforward, so they're pretty easy to get in y equals mx plus b form. So for these, we're going to subtract the x from both sides. So this one's going to be y greater than -x plus 4. And second one, we'll do it in green, subtract the x from both sides. That's going to be y less than -x minus 1. Okay, so red line. We're starting at +4. Slope is -1, so we're going down 1 over 1. It's a dashed line. That would go something kind of like that. And this one is greater, so we're on the upside. So that's up here. Okay, green line. That one we're going to start at -1. Slope is also -1/1. So this one's also going down 1/1. That was less than, so that's everything down on the lower side. Okay, so question then becomes, where did the two colors overlap? Didn't, right? So for that particular one, if they don't overlap, then they are, or there is no solution for that one. Doesn't happen a lot, but you know, they do throw that out there just to keep you on your toes, that, you know, if you do graph these and they don't touch at all, then you look at no solution. Now, the only way that's going to be possible, if you're doing y equals mx plus b, these slopes would have to be the same. If they're the same, then it's kind of like what we were doing before. If they've got the same slope, then you've got a trick question, because either one, they're going to be going in opposite directions, or if this green line had been going in this way, well, then your answer would have been, because now the red and the blue would have been here, well, that would have been basically the same thing you had on the red line. It would have just been this part that was up here. All right, and one more before we get to the non-graphing part. Let's change this one a bit. We did one like that before. Let's do it so we're doing x plus 2 squared. And then let's do, for red line, x minus y greater than or equal to -1. Okay, blue line is good. We don't have to change anything on that one. But the red line, we do need to put that one in y equals mx plus b form. So let's do that first. So for this one, we're going to subtract the x first. That's -y greater than or equal to -x minus 1. That basically we've got the -1 here with the y, so we got to go back and divide everything by -1. Which just really just changes the signs. But now the key thing is on this one though, if you're going to change this sign from y, from -y to +y, if you change one sign when you're here, you're changing all the signs. So instead of being greater now, this is going to be less than. That's going to be an x, and that's going to be a +1. Okay, so for the blue line, it's y greater than x plus 2 squared. And again, because this plus 2 is on the inside, we're going to take the quadratic and scoot it 2 places in the opposite direction. So we're going to back it up 2 spaces to the left. So that's going to center this thing up so it looks something kind of like that. And for this one, let's see, we're going greater, so that's on the inside. We'll graph that line. Well, let's do it blue. Hang on. So it's the same. That's everything in here. Again, if we're doing it in the up direction, that's basically everything in here. For that one, it's y less than or equal to x plus 1. Oops, let me cut it close. Tell you what, let me change that, because that was supposed to overlap a little bit better. Change this to a 4 right here instead of a 1. So it'll make an easy change. So 1, 2, 3, 4 should be about here. And slope is positive 1, so we're going up 1 over 1, so that should be a graph. This will take off and turn a bit faster here. That will be a straight line going something kind of like that. That one's also solid. Somewhere along like that. It's less than, so we're shaded on the downside. Again, we're freehanding it, so it may not be exactly how it's supposed to be, but we've got the blue and the green, so let's make that yellow. That's basically everything in that little wedge right in here. Okay, so a little bit of everything in that one. You're rewriting some parts, put it in y equals mx plus b form, graphing some circles, which we haven't done yet, but good review is it's making you go back and graph some quadratics, making you graph y equals mx plus b. No absolute values. I don't see any absolute value graphs because we didn't really key on those too much. I mean, we did a little bit, but really the big quadratics were the big thing we looked at, and that's why those keep popping up more and more. Okay, and the last thing. Is they're going to tell you without graphing. Determine if the system has no solution or infinitely many. Actually, no. This one is one of those you just have to look at it. At least it was to me. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. They're going to give you a system. Basically, it's the exact same thing twice with one minor difference. The inequality symbol. And here's the whole thing. They're trying to dig into it a little bit deeper, but really it comes down to if you're doing one of these problems, and we could do the same thing on this one. Do the exact same thing again, but change it to a less than equal to or greater than equal to. And here's where it comes down to one thing. You look at and again, they're telling you to do this without graphing, so this is kind of a shortcut kind of a deal. If it's just less than and just greater than, that means they're both dashed lines. This is going to be the same line that you're going to have. You know, if you were graphing this one, and I think it would be something kind of like this. Yeah, one of them you're going to shade this way, the other one you're going to shade that way. But it's a dashed line, right? So they don't have anything in common. And because they don't share anything, because it's like a state line, there's not any shared point. One side you're in Tennessee, the other side of the line you're in Alabama, there's not a shared part there. So this one, if it's just less than and just greater than, it's no solution. Where if you were to do this one where you put the bars underneath it, well, now you actually have a shared line where you've got the solid line, you've got one going this way, you've got the other going this way. Well, now they're sharing the border because it's attached to both of them. This will be the one where you're going to have infinitely many. And that's all they're asking you to do. And really, that they're just trying to get you to see that that's the difference of the two. If they're sharing, you know, a line, but one's going one direction, one's going the other, it depends on the line. If it's a solid line, there's an infinite line that you have that's actually a graph that they're sharing. If it's just less than and just greater than, they don't share the line, then it's two opposite sides. There's no common ground you can kind of pull with it there. That's it. That's all you got to do. So, no bar, it's no solution. If you have a bar, then it's infinitely many. So, no bar, no solution. Kind of think about it that way.